When I tell people that I study biology and I don't eat vegetables for health reasons, they usually think I'm joking or completely insane. We've all been told how vegetables are this nutritious superfood that we need to consume. But what no one talks about is the evidence that shows the complete opposite. For many people, vegetables are doing more harm than good. In today's video, I'm breaking down the 5 biggest reasons I don't eat vegetables and perhaps why you shouldn't eat them too. Let's get into it. In this video, I want to be fair and objective. So before we get into why I don't eat vegetables and why they can be problematic to many, let's first quickly look at the science which shows they are quote healthy. In every single study where they compare people who eat lots of vegetables to people who eat very few, the high vegetable group always has better health outcomes, lower inflammation markers, and tend to live a lot longer. People read these studies at face value and conclude that the science clearly shows vegetables are good for you. But there's a major fundamental flaw with all of these studies. People have to eat something instead of vegetables. And for 99% of people, if you're on a low vegetable diet, you're instead eating lots of processed food in place of them. Now, I don't believe vegetables are good for you, but obviously processed foods, which are often packed with man-made chemical additives like emulsifiers, preservatives, artificial sweeteners, and seed oils, are much worse for you than vegetables. On top of that, there is another issue with these studies. People who eat a lot of vegetables are usually very health conscious. They're more likely to exercise regularly, avoid smoking, drink less alcohol, and as a whole, they take better care of themselves. This right here creates something called healthy user bias. It's one of the biggest challenges in the field of nutrition. A great example of this is quad strength. Studies show that people with strong quadriceps tend to live longer. But is there something magically protective about having strong quads? Or is it just that people who are willing to train quads on a consistent basis are usually the people who are into health and fitness the most? Because I mean, let's be real, most people, they don't want to be doing those hard heavy leg days. So unless you're right into health and nutrition, chances are you're not going to have very strong quads. In other words, it's not that quads make people live a long time. It's the lifestyle that built them. These studies that claim to prove vegetables are healthy, all they show is that vegetables are better for you than even worse foods. It's like comparing the lungs of people who smoke a pack of cigarettes a day to those who drink alcohol daily. Sure, the drinkers, they might have healthier lungs, but you couldn't conclude from that study that alcohol is good for your lungs. Yet this is the kind of logic used in science claiming that vegetables are healthy. The same flaw is present in the now famous Blue Zone studies. In fact, these studies have become so famous they now have their own Netflix film. The Blue Zones are 5 regions in the world where people live significantly healthier and longer lives than the global average. Because these people eat a lot of vegetables, many people like to claim this proves that vegetables are the key to a long life. But in reality, the main reason people live so long in the Blue Zones is because they're eating far less processed food, as well as the fact that they have a number of other beneficial lifestyle behaviors. And here's something that basically never gets mentioned. The human potential lifespan is 120 years old. Every organ in your body is biologically capable of functioning for that long. Yet even in the so-called healthy Blue Zones, the average lifespan expectancy is around 80 years. In all of these studies where they show that vegetables are supposedly healthy, there are no variables that are controlled for, and therefore you cannot make the cause and effect claim that high vegetable consumption leads to positive health outcomes. There is no good evidence showing vegetables are actually good for you, but there is a large amount of evidence that proves that vegetables can cause problems for a lot of people. I know this firsthand. Growing up, I struggled with gut problems so bad that I had to take a month off school. My skin, it was a mess, and my energy was always just average. But when I cut out all the plants from my diet, including vegetables, these problems vanished almost overnight. 2 years later, I feel better than I ever have. And the thing is, I'm not alone. I've spoken to, at this point, thousands of people who share the exact same experience. This brings me to the first reason as to why I don't consume vegetables. They are all toxic in some way to some degree. When you tell people every vegetable contains toxins, they often have a very hard time grasping this. Their immediate reaction is surely not, there's no way vegetables could be toxic. And to that I say, well then, why is it that you can't feed your dog onions without poisoning it? And why can't you eat raw potatoes without getting very sick? The reason all vegetables are toxic is actually very straightforward. One of the first things I was taught in my biology degree is that the primary objective of any living organism is to survive and reproduce. Both animals and plants are living organisms, and so in order to survive, they need a way to defend themselves from threats. Animals can run, kick, bite. In the case of kangaroos, if you're not careful, you'll get hit with the classic jab-cross combo. In one way or another, every single animal can defend itself through some sort of physical capability. But plants, they're stationary, obviously. They can't move, so instead they defend themselves through something called chemical warfare, otherwise known as biowarfare, which does sound a bit cooler, I gotta say. This is why in every single plant there's a long list of toxins in it called defense compounds that the plant uses to defend itself. Now this isn't some conspiracy theory, it's basic evolutionary biology. I challenge anyone watching this video to find a single plant that does not contain significant amounts of toxins. You might be there for a while because they don't exist. An example of one of these defense compounds, which is found in many vegetables, including spinach, beets, and potatoes, is called oxalates. When you consume them, they bind with calcium to form sharp crystals that accumulate throughout your body. Oxalates are incredibly problematic to humans. They cause joint pain, mood issues, mineral deficiencies. But worst of all, these calcium oxalate crystals cause 80% of all kidney stones. Then there are tannins, which are present in spinach, eggplant, and kale, to name a few. Tannins are a compound that bind to proteins. This is an issue because every cell in your body has protein structures on its surface. So tannins can bind to these structures, which triggers inflammation, disrupts cell signaling, and hinders your immune function. Another interesting thought is, why do children and almost all people hate vegetables? If vegetables were truly this amazing food, packed with everything we needed and nothing we didn't, then why wouldn't our bodies recognize that, and as a result reward us for eating them? Why wouldn't they taste good? The reason vegetables have a bitter taste is the same reason our nose detects when something has gone bad by its awful smell. Our taste buds are designed to identify toxins and give us a negative feedback response. This protects us from eating harmful things. Even as adults, most of us still don't actually enjoy vegetables. Most people have to cover them in spices, drown them in sauces, or cook them in an absurd amount of butter just to make them semi-tolerable. The reason some people grow to enjoy vegetables over time isn't because they're objectively delicious. It's a survival adaptation. If your body notices that you're eating large amounts of a certain food, it assumes that because you're consistently eating it, this food must be one of your only available energy sources. If it continued to taste very unpleasant to you, you wouldn't eat much of it, so you wouldn't consume enough energy and therefore you could die of starvation. So in response, your taste buds, they adjust. But when you stop consuming it for a while, you lose this adaptation and they start to taste terrible again. It is a scientific fact that every single plant contains toxins, regardless as to whether or not it's considered a superfood. Ask anyone who's had a kidney stone if they still think that spinach is healthy. Or take avocados and cocoa powder, which aren't vegetables, but they are both praised as superfoods. These foods are both so toxic that if you give it to a dog, it can die essentially instantly. So that's the first reason I don't eat vegetables. They're all toxic, at least to some degree. The second reason I don't eat vegetables is because of our physiology, which is just a fancy way of saying how our bodies work. When you look at the makeup of the human digestive system and its ability to break down plant toxins, there's a key component missing. Since all plants contain toxins, any animal that eats plants without issues must have specific biological features that allow them to break down these toxins effectively. For example, we can look at ruminant animals such as cows, sheep, and deer. These animals have a highly complex digestive system with 4 chambers, allowing them to ferment and break down tough plant material. Because of this ruminant system, they can ferment plant fibers and neutralize many of the toxic compounds that are found in these plants before they can cause them any harm. Another group that can do this are hindgut fermenters. Examples include gorillas, rhinos, and elephants. These are animals with massive large intestines, which they use to ferment plant material and break it down effectively. The key point to this is that every animal that eats plants without it causing problems to them has some kind of system that breaks down these plant toxins. But when we look at humans, well, we don't have any of these specific mechanisms. We have a simple digestive system that is similar to other carnivorous animals. As a result, many of the toxins in plants don't get broken down. They pass through us intact and they can cause us significant harm. So that's the second reason why I don't eat vegetables. Our biology doesn't allow us to break down plant defense compounds. The third reason I don't eat vegetables is because of what we humans have done to them. Here's a fact most people don't know. Every single vegetable that you see today is man-made. There isn't a single vegetable we eat that exists naturally in the wild without human intervention. This is a fact. Broccoli was created in Italy within the last couple of thousand years. Carrots were developed in the Middle East just 1,000 years ago. These vegetables were created through a process called crossbreeding, which whilst fascinating, can cause a number of problems. Here's how this works. Two plants are grown side by side and allowed to cross-pollinate. The offspring of these plants is a new plant with a combination of genetic traits from both. But this is only the beginning of human manipulation of plants. In recent years, it's gotten far worse. We've moved from crossbreeding in fields to engineering vegetables in labs. To stop pests from eating crops, scientists have started using something called GMO technology. This is where genes from one plant, or in some cases even bacteria, are essentially copied and inserted into another plant. There are a few potential problems with this. Firstly, because these vegetables have been manipulated, many of which to be bigger and more pest resistant, these vegetables often contain more levels of their natural defense toxins. These vegetables have also been bred for industrial profit via sweetness, color, and shelf life, so it's more appealing to the consumer. Over time, this has resulted in fewer nutrients in the plants. But perhaps the main issue with this manipulation of these plants is one that we do not yet recognize. Crossbreeding at this speed and GMO are human-conducted processes. We have not evolved or developed to eat these plants. When we manipulate these plants, we also change the vegetable's biological profile. We have not studied, nor do we understand what these biological changes will do to us. But because these plants don't kill us immediately, scientists, they don't seem to care. They are more than happy to make them more toxic because it allows them to grow with a decreased risk of being eaten by pests before they can be sold. As a result, they make more profit. So that's the third reason I don't eat vegetables. They have been tampered with by humans, which has made them even more harmful. Now, the fourth reason I avoid vegetables, in my opinion, is even more concerning. Like we just talked about, farmers do not like it when pests eat their vegetables. No one wants to buy produce that has bite marks all through it. So to keep predators away, they use pesticides, which are essentially just a mix of lab-made chemicals sprayed on crops to stop insects, bugs, and other animals from getting to them first, as well as to stop weeds growing throughout the crops. Think about that for a second. They are spraying a compound on your food that is designed to kill animals and plants. The most commonly used pesticide is called Roundup. In Roundup, there is an ingredient called glyphosate. This is actually used to kill plants, in particular the weeds that grow throughout vegetable crops. Glyphosate is a synthetic version of the amino acid glycine. It is designed to disrupt enzyme pathways in plants, ultimately killing them. Whilst we thought it was safe for humans, there's growing evidence that it has serious effects, particularly in our gut microbiome. This is because many of our beneficial gut bacteria share the same vulnerable pathway that glyphosate targets in plants. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, well, if there is an ingredient in this pesticide that is specifically designed to kill plants, why would they spray it on our vegetables? Well, here's the crazy part, even more crazy part, should I say. Some crops like corn, soy, canola, and cottonseed have been genetically modified to be resistant to glyphosate. These are called Roundup-ready crops. Farmers spray glyphosate over their entire field and it kills everything, well, all plants I should say, except for the GMO plants, which are designed to survive glyphosate exposure. Sounds pretty good for you, right? But even in pesticides that don't use glyphosate, there are still many other ingredients which may actually be worse, such as POEA. When scientists have tested formulas containing POEA on human gut and liver cells, they found it causes necrosis. By the way, that means cell death, meaning the cells were so damaged they could not survive it. The mistake a lot of people make is thinking that they can get around all of this by buying organic vegetables. But to the surprise of many, organic doesn't mean pesticide-free. It just means the pesticides used are classified as natural. The problem is the term natural isn't clearly defined. Technically, everything at some point or another is natural. Uranium is natural. Cocaine is natural. Whiskey and tobacco, they're natural. Now I'm sure there's a few of you who are sitting there and thinking, finally, some good news in this video. But my point is that just because a pesticide is labeled as natural, it doesn't mean it's safe. Many of the ingredients used in natural pesticides are still highly concerning and can have harmful effects in the human body. For example, many of them contain pyrethrin, which is a natural insecticide derived from flowers. There is evidence that this is toxic to our nervous systems and can cause allergic reactions in some people. As we now all know, anything derived from a plant will contain toxins in the first place anyway. A lot of people think, well, I wash my vegetables, so I'm not consuming these pesticides. But what they don't understand is that these pesticides are designed to withstand torrential rain. I'm talking hailstorms. They have ingredients such as alkyl polyglucoside, which is a surfactant. The purpose of surfactants is to help the pesticide stick to the outside of the plant and actually penetrate its surface, so that when this rainfall comes, it doesn't get washed off. Farmers, they can't afford these chemicals washing off in a downpour, because then the bugs would get to the crops and as a result, they'd make no money. So no matter how powerful your tap is, it doesn't matter if you have the Mega Blaster 3000. It's not getting rid of those chemicals. They're baked into the surface and absorbed by the plant itself. And I'm sure just by simply looking at this list of chemicals found in an organic pesticide, you can come to a pretty solid conclusion that these things are not part of our species appropriate diet and are certainly not good for you. So that's the fourth reason as to why I don't consume vegetables. They're soaked in man-made chemicals. Now you may be sitting there thinking to yourself, alright, yes, maybe there is some bad in vegetables. Maybe they do have toxins, but surely the good in vegetables make up for it. A lot of people think they contain lots of nutrients. Well, this right here brings me to my fifth reason as to why I don't consume vegetables. On the surface, many vegetables do contain a considerable amount of certain nutrients. This is why in many people's eyes they're considered superfoods. But here's the thing. We can't absorb a lot of these nutrients. For example, in this study here, they found that only 1.4% of the iron in spinach is actually absorbed by humans. This is one of the key reasons many vegans have vitamin deficiencies, even though technically speaking, they eat the recommended daily amount of those given vitamins. The reason for this poor nutrient absorption is due to a group of plant defense compounds called anti-nutrients. This group of compounds, by definition, binds with nutrients and prevents their absorption. Oxalates and tannins, like I mentioned earlier, are both examples of anti-nutrients. But one of the worst anti-nutrient compounds is actually something that most people think is good for them: fiber. What a lot of people don't realize is that humans can't break down fiber. Animals we discussed earlier, such as ruminants and hindgut digesters, they can ferment fiber, which does break it down. But for humans, it goes in one end and comes out the other end basically unchanged. But before it leaves the body, fiber does two things that are often overlooked and problematic. Firstly, it absorbs water and swells, physically binding to the gut lining, which can interfere with digestion and even irritate the gut wall in some people. Secondly, it binds to essential nutrients, dragging them with it and out of the body before we have a chance to absorb them. Hence why fiber is considered an anti-nutrient. Many people say that we can ferment fiber and that this is beneficial, but we can only ferment less than 5% of it. And this fermenting process actually causes more harm than good. When fiber ferments, it releases gases like hydrogen, methane, and carbon dioxide, which can cause bloating, cramping, and digestive discomfort. When I removed vegetables and therefore fiber, I could not believe how much my digestion and gut health improved. The reality is, fiber is blocking your nutrient absorption, damaging your gut lining, and making it so the people around you don't like you as much. Because of these anti-nutrient compounds, the amount of usable nutrition you actually get from vegetables is shockingly low. Like I mentioned earlier, in recent years, the amount of nutrients you get from vegetables has actually gotten far worse. In order for vegetables to contain lots of nutrients, the soil they're grown in must be nutrient rich. But here's the problem. When you grow vegetables in soil, some of the nutrients from that soil transfer into the vegetable, which leaves the soil with less nutrients. In a healthy ecosystem, animals naturally fertilize the land with their, well, you know what, you can fill in the blank, which then returns nutrients back into the soil. This cycle keeps the soil nutrient dense, but modern farming, well, it doesn't work this way. Farmers want to grow as many crops as possible. They don't have time to let these animals come in and re-fertilize the land. Instead, they use synthetic fertilizers, which are not even remotely as effective as animal inputs. So crops are grown over and over again in the same soils in the same fields year after year with no animal fertilization. Today's soils contain significantly less nutrients than they used to. This is exactly why vegetables contain roughly 20 to 40% fewer nutrients than they did back in the 1940s. Modern vegetables as a whole are certainly not ideal. The credible science showing they're good for you does not exist. Each one contains a long list of toxic compounds. We humans have no way to break them down. They are engineered to be more toxic. They are sprayed in harmful pesticides which don't come off, and they don't contain significant amounts of nutrients that we humans can absorb. You may be sitting there and thinking to yourself, so you're telling me even vegetables are bad for me? What can I even eat? Well, I have good news for everyone watching. There is a solution to all of this. There is a simple trick you can do where you can eat plants and get all the nutrients you need without any of the toxins. Because I'm feeling nice, I'll break it down for you step by step. Here's what you do. You get an animal, for example, a cow, and you let this cow eat the plants. Due to its complex ruminant digestive system that we talked about earlier, they will ferment these plants, which breaks down the toxins and absorbs the nutrients. Once the toxins are broken down and the nutrients are extracted, they then use this plant material to build their flesh. As a result, you get this wonderful thing. It's called meat. Because cows have the biological capability to break down plants and are an animal, meaning they defend themselves through physical capability rather than this bio-warfare. This final product, it's perfect. It's completely free from toxins, but on top of that, it contains every single nutrient you need in the perfect quantities. This is why meat is the ultimate superfood. The truth is, humans are not meant to eat plants, which is why we thrive on our species-appropriate diet, a plant-free carnivore diet. Based on our fossil records, it is very clear that humans ate this way for the majority of our existence. When we look at old human fossils from our carnivorous ancestors, they show they have very few lesions and markings on them. This is important because lesions and markings are what indicate disease. So because they have very few of these things, it tells us that as a whole, they didn't have much disease and were very healthy. At this point, there are millions of people on this plant-free carnivore diet. If you're one of these people, drop a comment down below telling others about your story. If you're interested in learning about how we know that humans only ate meat for the majority of our existence, as well as how we know that introducing plants to our diet, what was started this massive decline in health, then you will enjoy this video right here. It's a mini documentary I made which shows what humans have eaten throughout history and breaks down all the evidence showing how we know this. Anyways, as always, great speaking with you. See you next time.